Well, I certainly hope that everybody had a terrific weekend. It's always nice to have a little bit of a change in schedule, although I know almost all of you have well, all of you have lots of stuff to do outside of school. So the weekend is not always the big break we might hope it could be. But I know all of you are working hard, and I hope that you were able to relax a little bit. Yeah, for me as well, this weekend was not the break I was anticipating. Wasn't able to get a lot of things done that I have been working on trying to get done, particularly for you guys. And I've been having some issues with internet connectivity and stuff. It's nobody's fault. It's just the timing really sucks. Well, last week we talked about art in China and Japan. Um, in another class that I teach, we talk about art in India and Southeast Asia as well. And it's really hard to share even a significant amount of art from these different regions. All we can do is just give a little bit of a flavor for what's going on. Now, with Africa, this is our next stop on our world tour, and it is a rapid world tour. In Africa, there are tens of thousands of languages spoken. There are, or actually, not just languages, but over the last several centuries, actually, the last several thousand years, thousands and thousands of languages have been invented and spoken, as well as other communication routines, like several different versions of sign languages, rebus writing, all sorts of stuff. Africa is the thing that gave us the emperor, the Roman emperor, who basically defined London and what England was going to be like for the next 1800 years. He was from Libya. His name is Septimus Severus, and his wife was from Syria. Africa is what gave us the pyramids. It was the Nubian pyramids. The Nubian engineers taught the Egyptian engineers how to build their pyramids. You get that term cyclopean architecture. We hear that every once in a while. Cyclopean is a reference to Cyclops, and cyclopean architecture means huge blocks of stone, like Stonehenge in England. But what we see in Africa along the East Coast, well, inland from the East Coast in Zimbabwe, is some of the most amazing examples of this truly ancient type of architecture. We get all sorts of things like mysteries of crusaders and Christian knights going into Ethiopia. Ethiopia, there's all sorts of wild stuff out of Ethiopia. They have one of the biggest Bibles. Their Bible has maybe 30 more books in the Old Testament than the King James Version does, because that Christian tradition has been around pretty much unbroken since the beginning of Christianity. We have perhaps some of the oldest architecture on the entire planet in Adam's Clock in South Africa. So there's lots of really cool stuff going on. And of course, we have the original Lion King himself, Sundiata, a person who most likely invented public education in the ancient world, who's the Scorpion King in Egypt. And like I said, lots of other really incredibly cool stuff. So if we have, and of course, the birth of humanity. So we take into account the 54, 56 countries, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different groups of people. There's actually more genetic diversity on the continent of Africa than the rest of the world put together, human genetic diversity. We have some of the oldest bloodlines. This is where the Queen of Sheba was, who went and came from, who went and talked to Solomon, the same Solomon who's in the Old Testament. Lots of very cool stuff. For art, what we're going to be primarily looking at is art of Kente cloth in Ghana, as well as the terracotta of Mali. The Mali Empire at one point stretched from the Atlantic Ocean all the way over to Ethiopia, pretty much. I mean, its influence was that broad sweeping. It is really tremendous. And I believe that in this module, we're also going to be talking about the next step. Are we? Yeah, we're going to be talking about the next step in your Sundiata project. I am going through and grading stuff. I'm going to, before midterms, everything that you've turned in, I'm going to be grading. I wanted to speak to that a little bit because I wanted to let you know too, if you see a 0, I've had a couple conversations with people already. I know life gets in the way. I know that not everything happens the way you want it to happen. And every single time that somebody's talked to me, there's been absolutely no problem with extending due dates or anything like that. And I'm more than happy to work with you. Turning in assignments to the wrong submission area will garner a 0 and a little note just reminding you, saying, hey, this needs to be turned in the right area. And zeros often, well, almost always mean all they are is just for Canvas to, I put the 0 there in the assignment so that Canvas can remind you to go ahead and take care of the assignment. And once you turn it in, we'll be good. But like I said, I want to get everything cut up grade-wise by midterm so everybody knows where they stand. Some of the easiest ways to, as we move forward, some of the easiest ways to take care of grading is, several people have reminded me, hey, I resubmitted this and I don't see a new grade on it. And I've been able to take care of those things. You can also go through, make sure that you've watched all the videos for attendance, like today's. And I would just go through and look at your assignments, take care of quizzes. If any of the quizzes have less than perfect points, you can retake them. I mean, all the quizzes should be retakeable for as many times as you need to. If you need to retake a quiz 30 times in order to get a perfect score, do that. But those are two of the easiest ways to make sure that you have a good number of points, to make sure that you've watched all the videos for attendance, as well as made sure you've done all the quizzes. Written reflections, take care of them. We need to talk about the written reflections here in this module in particular, because it has confused a lot of people, and I'm sorry about that. This module is adapted from one that is, not the module, the entire course is adapted for one that Brian Astle with the faculty made so that all the ARC 1010 classes are pretty much uniform. And in this, and some of these, you'll notice that there are 2 reflections. The 2 reflections need to be written separate. And I do want to talk about ChatGPT. There is something in the syllabus about this, and I'm happy to clarify it. With ChatGPT, I expect everybody knows what that is, and I expect you to use it. When you do your writing, it's a really good idea to use that. But when you use ChatGPT in your writing, you need to approach it as somebody who is helping you, not as somebody who is doing the work instead of you. Whenever you turn in work that is not your own, that is done by somebody or something else, and you present it as your own, that is cheating. But when somebody is helping you and you put your own spin on it, you double check, make sure it's good, and you change the things that you need to, then they've helped you and it becomes your work. The clue for me that somebody has not taken that time is when you're writing a reflection and you're supposed to be thinking about this, and what I get shows that whoever wrote it did not read the directions and did not listen to the video for that module. And in the middle of it is a sentence, something like, as an AI program, I do not have my own thoughts or opinions, so I can't speak to this, and I don't have a favorite art form because I'm only a ChatGPT program. Then that's a really good indicator that the person hasn't bothered to take the time to rewrite it. When you use ChatGPT with your writing assignments, You need to use that as only the first draft and go over and rewrite it so that it feels like it's something that you would say yourself. That gives you an opportunity to catch those things that teachers will ding you on. I know several teachers, especially in the art department and English department, that will fail you on the entire assignment when you don't bother to take the time to at least revisit the writing and change it so that it sounds like it's in your own voice. So that's a clue for all future reflections. If I catch any of that in this class, that you've used ChatGPT and you don't have enough respect for yourself, that you have reread it and given it your own voice, then it'll earn a 0, and I'll just ask you to resubmit. However, if you go to higher level classes, 2000 and above, you're going to see most of the time the teachers will fail you on that assignment. So you need to be careful. ChatGPT is not going away. It is a tremendous tool and it helps, but you need to use it as a tool instead of to replace yourself. So back to the 2 written reflections for this module. One is called Written Reflection Kente Cloth, and one is called Written Reflection Africa. With the written reflection called Kente Cloth, what you need to do is write specifically about the Kente cloth. In the written reflection labeled Africa, I need you to write about all of the stuff in the module on Africa. And remember that Africa is a big place. Africa is like I said, 56 countries, and it's 54 countries on the continent and then 2 more island countries. But there are huge numbers of people there. There are huge numbers. There's a huge amount of diversity. There is an awful lot of stuff in Africa. So when you write that reflection, make sure that you are reflecting on the entire module. And to help, I've just barely moved it so that in the module itself, it is at the very end after you do your brainstorming on Sundiata. So hopefully that'll give you an opportunity to look at some of the other stuff that in the module regarding Africa. If you submit the Kente cloth reflection with the Africa or in the Africa reflection as well, so you submit the same reflection twice, you'll get a 0, and I'll just ask you to write it about using the prompts that are in the actual assignment. And if you're going to use chat, the prompts that I give you are not the ones you put into chat. They're the ones to help your human brain deal with the information, because chat needs a lot more clear definitions of what to write so it sounds good. So keep that in mind as well. So the second stop on our tour around the world is Africa. And what we're going to specifically look at, like I mentioned, is Kente cloth in Ghana, as well as the Mali, the old Mali Empire, the art from the time of Sundiata. Sundiata was about maybe 600 years ago, something like that, 700 years ago. And this was when you look at your map of Africa, Sundiata at that time was controlling Ghana as well as Mali, and he had his influence all the way from the Atlantic Ocean all the way right across that band of Africa, totally horizontal, all the way over to pretty closely to Ethiopia. And the reason why I admire him so much is that he would go into an area that had been ruled by essentially terrorists, people that had brutalized their population for generations, people that ruled by fear and terror over individuals. And he would destroy the sorcerer kings, is what they were called, and the warlords. Then he would go through and enact sweeping legislation where people would have an opportunity to speak up for themselves. So as a representative government, and there were elements of the government that were representative. And he also ensured that people would learn how to read and write so that they could write contracts to protect themselves from future people that were trying to hurt them. And he would ensure that everybody had the right to worship the way that they wanted or they felt that they needed to. So those are three reasons that I really like Sundiata. And other than that, when he was 12 years old, some ladies in the neighborhood were making fun of his mom and complaining because he hadn't been able to walk yet. And he got a little annoyed at the ladies making fun of his mom. So he got up, went over, uprooted a baobab tree from their yard, and turned around and asked his mom, the first words he spoke, "Hey, Mom, where would you like me to put this tree?" And it shut up all the ladies that were irritating his mom. So that's the fourth reason I like him. Anyway, so Ghana, on campus, the gentleman who is the head of the special accommodations office, his family comes from Ghana, and it is absolutely beautiful country. Lots of wonderful things come there. But one of the reasons why we're looking at Kente cloth is because of the way it's made and its history. This is one of the things that is really amazing to me. The Kente cloth tradition goes back, it looks like it could be going back 3,000 years. But the Kente cloth, as we see it right now, it goes back a few hundred years in the way that we would recognize it now. And there are some very specific things about the Kente cloth tradition. One is most of the textile traditions that we're familiar with involve women doing the weaving, but Kente cloth is only woven by men. Another thing that is very interesting, remember I said that the continent of Africa has thousands of different ways of communication. It's not just spoken word. What is fascinating about the Kente cloth is that each of the little designs, squares, each of the design elements tell a story and mean something different. They mean something specific to whoever is making the cloth. This is important because when you make the cloth or somebody makes it for you on your behalf, they have to learn about who you are, what you've done, and who your family is, how the family fits into the community, what you've done for the community. And then they will take that into account to bring together the colors for the weaving, for the pattern, as well as the particular designs. Now, you'll see in this module, and this module section that I'm talking about is labeled World Tour Africa. And this module section talks about, let's see, let me tell you, it is right underneath Module 7 Overview. But in this module section, there's a video that introduces Kente cloth. Then there's a selection of 10 different colors with their meaning. And then underneath that, you'll see a graphic that shows 8 different styles of patterns and what they mean. And I'm going to talk about some of them because what you're going to be doing for the studio assignment for this is creating your own Kente cloth pattern and building up your own design. You're not going to be weaving it. You're going to be using colored pencils or colored pens, but that's what you're going to be working with particularly. So the different colors in Kente cloth are gold, which usually references royalty, wealth, and spiritual purity. Yellow, that also references royalty and wealth, but it also, in addition to those two, it represents holiness and something that's precious. White represents purity, healing, and festivities. Blue represents peace, harmony, and love. Green represents harvest, growth, and spiritual renewal. So think spiritual abundance too. Red represents blood, strong spiritual and political and spiritual feelings. So red could refer to religion. It could also, if somebody is politically active or a community organizer active in their community, red would be appropriate. If you are a veteran, red is appropriate because you're willing to shed blood for your country. Or if people in your family have suffered greatly because of their beliefs, red is also appropriate. Maroon, it represents Mother Earth and healing, so the divine feminine. Purple represents earth, healing, and femininity. And black represents maturity and the spirits of the ancestors. So black is not something to be feared, and neither is white in this tradition. Now, you are also going to have to do some of your own research on this, because I'm going to show you a graphic really quick here. I'm going to share my screen so you can see what I'm saying. Let's see if this works. Hooray! Yes, it does. Okay. What we see here is just a small selection of Kente cloth traditional design patterns. So we see here on the top left, you have these slight diagonals, and the diagonals are not made as diagonal lines necessarily, but as rectangles that are set next to each other so that the corners overlap, and the diagonals are made that way. There's also this design that looks very similar to something called a log cabin quilt design in Americana, which I think that's really interesting, where you have horizontal and vertical lines placed together so that they make square shapes. Then we have this orange and yellow, or red and yellow, where the rectangles are offset, so you have these almost jaggedy lines. To the top right, we have these diamonds that are on edge, giving another design. Now notice I'm not really talking about the meanings behind the design, because you can find that in this description as well in this module, and you can also do your own research online. And I would highly recommend doing that. There are a number of different websites where you can just look up Kente cloth designs and their meanings. And that is really, really good. Now, this one I think is really fascinating because it's a combination of things. We have these vertical stripes, red, green, and yellow. And then we also have these shapes going down. They're not quite squares. If you look at them really closely, they're almost like chevrons on the side, which I think is interesting. And then we also have these diagonal stripes, just like the one above it. And you look over here to the right, and this is the one on the bottom row, just to the left of center. And it looks like, to me, it's a little house that's black with a white triangle on top for the roof, and then it's surrounded by multicolored squares. That's a really intriguing design. Then just to the right of center on the bottom, we have something that looks very similar to a windmill. Now, this one I think is really interesting, because this kind of shape you actually see even in petroglyphs over here in the Americas. I don't know if it means the same thing. There's no way of knowing what those petroglyphs might mean that are over here, but it is interesting that this design is not dissimilar to other designs that we know of. And then here's a very, very particular stripe pattern where the horizontal lines of stripes are broken up by tiny little vertical lines. I think that's really interesting. Now, Kente cloth today is used as, for example, school colors for private schools. It's used as treasured family heirlooms. It's used to honor somebody who's done something wonderful for the community or has saved lives and helped other people. Looks like these Kente cloth scarves that these people are wearing, I think a more appropriate term would be, even though it looks like a scarf, it's not a scarf. Mantle is a better word for this, because it's cloth that's draped around somebody's shoulders to show honor and respect. So it means something very different than how we would use a regular scarf. But you look at how these graduating folks all have very similar designs in their scarves. And so I think in this case, it probably represents the schools that they're going to, or it might be their student honors. And then down here we see, here's an individual who is a master Kente cloth designer. He's one of these people who weaves these when people need an award or an honor given to somebody, or they go to him and say, would you make a design for our family? He designs it and he puts it together. So he really knows his stuff. His name is Kwasi Asare. Now, so that gives you a little bit of background on Kente cloth. Again, we're going really fast, but we also want to talk about ceramics. Now, most of these ceramics, there's lots and lots and lots of styles. Uh, and it's fascinating to me that there are some things that seem to be consistent from area to area, but not all the time. Sometimes when people moved around, they carried traditions with them. They would interact with each other and share different designs, kind of how maybe those different people doing the cave painting in Europe, how they communicated perhaps. But some of these designs, there are a little bit of indicators here and there that if you look at other art from different areas, maybe that will help. And in the portion of the module where I talk about brainstorming and stuff, I think I might give a little bit more information on that. But this is a contemporary vessel that's made. There's a lot of really incredible historical vessels. Terracotta is it is a wood kiln-fired type of clay, and it's called terracotta, which means literally red earth because generally the clay is very reddish. And when we look at art from the Old Mali Empire and Sundiata, the areas around there, which include Ghana, people use clay a lot of the times. It was very red and sometimes gray or yellow too. But it's referred to when you see clay in an art historical context. A lot of the times they will call stuff that is older terracotta. And that's just something for you to remember. So we're looking at this vessel, and the vessel is really beautifully built. I notice these lines right here. You first look at that and you think, oh, well, that doesn't really seem to be even or professionally done. But remember, we need to apply the 4 tools of artistic critique: describe, analyze, interpret, and evaluate. Describing this, we can see this vessel is very cleanly made. And we can see that these are even. Yeah, this is diagonal, this is diagonal, this is diagonal, but the angle of this diagonal going around the rim matches the angle of this diagonal and this diagonal. So every other one is the same angle, which shows us that this person had strong control over the material that they were working with. And you look at the detail in here, how delicate that is. This band is only about 1 inch wide. This person really knew what they were doing. And when we can see that, when we can see this kind of control and craftsmanship, then when we look down and we see lines like this being a little bit organic and wiggly, we know that they did that for a specific reason. If this was sloppy, then we could assume that this might be sloppy too. But the fact that these holes are very evenly done lets us know that they were applied on purpose. And the reason for this line wiggling, we may not know what it is, but we do know that the artist did that specifically for a reason. Whatever that reason is, we don't know. So this is beautifully made pot. And here is a very cool video that shows how a West African pottery is made in Burkina Faso. Now, what is kind of neat about these kinds of things is seeing how people generate and create this kind of material. These traditions go back centuries, and they are often passed down through families or guilds. Now, Lady Kwali, she is a Nigerian artist that is an acclaimed potter. And her work, if you get a chance to look at it, I would definitely look her stuff up, Lady Kwali. And it is amazing what she's done. She used potter's wheels, but she didn't always just use potter's wheels. She also did slab making. So she really understood the material properties of clay, as well as she had a real rich depth of understanding of aesthetics. So her work is impeccable craftsmanship and really beautiful design. Now, the next portion of the module, we talked about Kente cloth, and this is going to be a written reflection just on Kente cloth. Now, this is an interesting one because this is a politician response to the beating death of George Floyd, where Democrats from the US Congress decided to hold a ceremony where they bent the knee and were quiet in silence and respect of George Floyd as a way of protesting police brutality. What is disappointing to me is that people responded to this with the assumption that these are just politicians grandstanding. And that may very well be possible. But people responding to them negatively just focused on what appeared to be this half of the picture, where you have Caucasians wearing Kente cloth that, unless somebody made it for them and their families because of some good that they did for a Ghanaian community, they really don't have much business wearing this. But you see over here on the right-hand picture, we have a couple individuals who are more coffee-colored skin, and with that, they may have a genetic link in their family back to the area where this cloth came from. I know that's an uncomfortable subject, but both of these people here could very well have Ghanaian citizenship and family in their family tree. And maybe these two, the people over here too. But what is a little bit frustrating to me is people making negative comments about this only focused on the skin tone of the people involved. I do have a friend who is very Caucasian looking, and his family actually does come from the continent of Africa. So this idea of skin tone defining how we can behave is a poor argument as well. One way or on either side of it. But what this does is ask us, invites us to ask a question of ourselves and our observation. Is this appropriation? Are these people stealing this generationally important and significant design in order to make a political point and to score points on the media? I think that is one question. And another question is, if this person doesn't have the right to do that, why should this person have the right? And if this person has the right, who's to say he didn't give her the right? The people, what is sad about it is that people just react to the image without finding out any context. But it is interesting, and I want you to look at this, read this story, and then write your opinion about it. After you learn a little bit more what Kente cloth means, things like that, write your opinion about it. Honestly, there isn't a right or wrong opinion about this. The thing I'm looking for is that you're able to articulate what you think about it. That's the important thing. All of you are cognition professionals. That means you're being educated in the university system. I want to know what you think about this, so articulate it well. I don't know how long your written reflection is going to be. I would spend at least 15 minutes thinking about it, and then maybe a half an hour to an hour writing it and rewriting it. If you use ChatGPT, remember to rewrite it before you turn it in. But really think about this. And if it helps, even talk to a friend, a roommate, or a family member about this and see if that will help you as you articulate your own perspective on it. I think one thing that is important to ask ourselves is, when we are looking at imagery to adapt for our own use, are we honoring and respecting the people who generated that imagery, those styles in the first place? And I think if we are, then it's going to be okay. If we are using the imagery to get more views on YouTube or Instagram, or we are using the imagery to sell more sunglasses, then it can become a problem. And it can become a problem really quickly, because essentially what we're doing is taking something that is a cultural an individual identifier from another group of people that we are not involved in, and we're using that identifier for our own gain. And that is usually going to be a bit problematic, I think, to say the very least. And but I think this also speaks to the idea that we can't entirely judge, because I know there's a fashion designer in Brazil who got a lot of flack for a design line that he did just a couple of years ago. They used indigenous looking materials, locally sourced materials, and indigenous looking designs in his work. And what was interesting about it is that the people that gave him a hard time were not aware that he was the UNESCO ambassador of culture to an indigenous community in Brazil, and that he had closely worked with people in that community to both source the materials and help him develop the designs. So, people chose to complain rather than find the context. And I think there's a good lesson there, that we need to know what the context is before we can really judge. Now, this next element is the quiz. And all these quizzes are 10 points. And go through here. And again, if you find that you've missed points, go back and retake the quiz. You can't resubmit with just one thing changed. You have to retake the entire quiz. So before doing that, go through and photograph it. All your right answers if you'd like. But I think just from a little bit that we've talked about, there's some things that we've learned. Most Kente cloth weavers are men. Yes, that is truth. Kente cloth is worn for everyday commonplace activities, not so much. Grocery shopping, no. Performing surgery, sometimes, maybe. I doubt it though. But definitely for every special, important, or sacred occasion. Absolutely. So this is very right. The patterns in Kente cloth are random. They are just visual and have no meaning outside of that. Well, we just talked about that. There are Kente cloth master designers who will create patterns and with colors that are specifically meant for the families or people that the cloth is intended to be given to. So this question, are they random? No, they're not random. So that's false. And the Kente cloth, how wide are the looms? Well, looms. Well, I'll have to look at that video again, but they're not very wide. They're not 10 feet wide. They're not 50 inches wide. I think they're wider than 4 inches, because the Kente cloth that I saw was at least 6 to 8 inches. So I'm going to guess about 3 feet wide. And again, if you screw up on this, if you lose question, just retake the quiz. If you have a problem, remember that I'm saying this. If you have a problem retaking a quiz, let me know, because I went through and I tried to make sure that every single quiz you can retake as many times as you need to. And then on June 8, 2020, the Congressional Democrats wore Kente cloth in a moment of silence for George Floyd. I believe that is true. That's what we just watched that video, or saw that video was addressing. So in your studio assignment for this week, what you're going to be doing, I want you to do your own research as well. These give you some pattern ideas. One thing that I want you to be aware of is that these patterns generally are going to be in square blocks, like this one. This has, let's see, partial 1, 2, 3, 4, partial 1, 2, 3, 4. So this one has 8 different blocks. These two are the same. These two are the same. And then these two and these two are the same. This is how you generate a design. Come up with some designs from your research and then create your own Kente cloth design. Now we know we're just doing this as a design exercise. We're not making genuine Kente cloth. We're exploring this from a place of respect for the visual tradition of the Kente cloth. So that's why we looked at an artist who is a master at doing this, and you can find other masters on YouTube as well. Look this up. But many of the artists who have done this tradition for whose families have done kente cloth for hundreds of years, have said that this is perfectly fine for us to explore this as a visual exercise, as we're doing it from a place of respect to honor those individuals who have developed this art form. So be mindful of that. And these are the instructions. Do your research. Spend at least a half an hour doing searches online, how to make kente cloth designs, the kente cloth design meaning, design your own kente cloth, those kinds of things. One search that I found was really good was make your own kente cloth designs, which showed me a lot of different ways of approaching this. And I like doing that because that gives me different perspectives to kind of evaluate and decide which one I want to use. As you do this, look for things that are important to you. Remember those self-identifiers that you looked at when that you considered when we first started doing artist research? All you had to, you were picking different artists to look up their artwork, but before doing that, you had to come up with 10 self-identifiers. Think about those. Think about important events in your life. Have you done something really wonderful for somebody? Are you a military veteran? Are you a nurse? Are you are you getting ready to be a doctor? Do you have siblings that you've helped out? Have people helped you? What have you contributed to your community? Those kinds of things. Think about as you do your research, and see if you can come up with designs that reflect those ideas. What you're going to be doing is coming up with 3 different Kente design blocks. And the blocks are going to be just like this, one simple design. Again, this one has like 10 different blocks. So the block that you would design would be just this area or just this area. Or if it's something like this, you would just design the stripes that you would repeat in a block, and that's it. This is a block, but this could also be a block, just with some of those diamond shapes. So think about that. You're designing 3 different designs, and you need to refer to the research that you've done. On a piece of paper, create a grid of 22-inch squares, and you'll draw pencil lines. Okay, this is something that I'm a little bit embarrassed about, because I had included a video to show you exactly how to draw that grid. So as soon as we're done with the call tonight, I'm going to go back and find that video and paste it in here for you to do that. But you're going to create a grid of 22-inch squares. And then you're going to draw in those 22-inch squares. You're going to repeat the 3 square designs that you've made. And people have done this. Well, I'm going to just refer back up here again. See this? This is 10 squares. And you can imagine if you copied this and moved it over here, that would be the assignment, because you have this design, and this design. That's 3 different designs. And if you just put them side by, copy this and put it side by side, you would have, I believe, about 20 squares. So that's about as difficult as this design is. What makes it unique is that everybody is going to make their own 3 designs that mean something to them, and you're going to use colors that mean something specific to you. Then you're going to take a photo of what you've done, and when you submit it, you're going to upload the photo with 3 sentences that you've written describing why you chose the colors you did, what the patterns you made mean to you, and how the 3 blocks you designed transformed when you drew them into the grid and repeated them. Because since there's a grid of 20 squares and you made 3 different designs, each of those designs are going to be repeated a few times. So I want you to think about that as you get ready to create this studio section. Now, the next is a brainstorming. The next assignment is a brainstorming. And on this one, you are going to type the notes and photos of your brainstorming session, essentially. That's what you're going to be sharing with me. You're going to be doing brainstorming with somebody, and I'm going to go back and talk about that just a little bit. So we learned a little bit about the elements and principles of design earlier, and we applied that to our appreciation of Sundiata and the art of the Mali Empire. Remember the tools of artistic critique: describe, analyze, interpret, and evaluate, which we learned and applied in that module. Well, we learned earlier, but we applied it in that module. We are able to use that to intentionally examine arts of other cultures and really tighten down on our own critical thinking skills. I included a short video that just to remind you who Sundiata Keita is. And this is a depiction of the immediate area of the Mali Empire. And we look up here at the map, see it's only this area right here on the continent of Africa. But the influence of the Mali Empire reached all the way across to here. I mean, people knew about it, knew who they were. And it was in everybody's interest to be friends with them as well. So something to think about. And this is only under one of the emperors of the Mali Empire, Mansa Musa. It was pretty amazing. In addition to present-day Mali, some of the modern countries once part of the Mali Empire include Burkina Faso, the Gambia, Ghana, Guinea-Bissau, Guinea, the Ivory Coast, Mauritania, Niger, and Senegal. That's a lot of them, but it touched into a few others as well. And in this module, we already learned about tradition in Ghana, which is one of those countries right up here. And then I want you to check out this video. It's a smart history video. I'm sorry, it's not a smart history video. This is an article that talks about the art of Africa, West Africa, and the art of Mali. So use your critical thinking skills that you learned from the steps of artistic critique: describe, analyze, interpret, and evaluate. Keep those in the back of your head as you look at this art and see if there are elements that you can identify that help you to know that something is art that comes from this time period and from this area of the world. What you're going to be doing is thinking about that and then thinking about how you are. And essentially, you're going to be brainstorming something that means something to you that didn't exist in the old Mali Empire, but should have. Last year, one of my students was in the nursing program, and she created a stethoscope out of materials that looked like they existed in the Mali Empire. Somebody else did, I believe they may have been getting married, but they created a table runner where they combined their own use or their own skill with crochet and an awareness of textile design from Mali, from that time period. And they created a really beautiful table runner. They weren't able to make it as long as they wanted, but they went as far as they could, as far as time allowed, because this project should not take you 200 hours. If you feel like it's getting away from you and it's taking too long, contact me, but it should not take all of your waking hours, that's for sure. Another student made a weight bench, but they took a regular weight bench and they covered it with materials that were available to the people in the Mali Empire 700 years ago. And they did it in such a way so it looked like the weight bench was made out of terracotta and wood. That was pretty amazing. Now, I've had at least 3 people make Malinese water parks. They thought, well, what would a water park look like that people had 700 years ago? And they created this thing they made a scale model. It was only about 14 inches tall for most of these people. And the scale model, they were making it with materials that they thought from their research the Milanese architects would have had access to. I've also had several people who did leatherwork and jewelry making, who made jewelry, and one guy made a messenger bag in the style of the Milanese leatherwork and jewelry. So those kinds of things are pretty cool. But what else can you do? I've also had somebody who made a model of a refrigerator. What would a refrigerator look like from this time period? And different things like that. So this brainstorming, you need to put those tools of artistic critique up in the front of your mind and start thinking about what could you do that that should have existed in the Mali Empire that didn't, and what kind of materials could you use? Some of the things that were not quite as successful as somebody just designed the project and just turned in their drawing, and that's not going to really work. That's a really good starting point, but that's not going to work at the end of the term, because just turning in a drawing, because it needs to demonstrate that you're making something that should have existed back then. Now, the difference is, if you do your research and find out what kinds of materials people were using to make their artwork with at that point, and then you made your drawing materials and your painting materials, and then you did something, that would count, because you are really trying to use your critical thinking skills and connecting with the society that we're examining. So I want you to spend some time on research and at least an hour brainstorming and recording your thoughts. And then I say here, to submit, include a document containing your typed notes and a photo of your sketches. So don't leave it just handwritten. Take your handwritten notes and type them up, and take pictures of the sketches that you've done. And then, after you do those two things, think about it some more and write down a typed description of what you want to build. The more work you do at this stage to flesh out your ideas, the easier it will be to build what you want to. And when I look at these, I'm also going to be looking at functionality and possibility of construction. I will say things like it's not really feasible for you to make a functioning water slide. So, maybe make a scaled model of what a water slide would look like. I did have some person who wanted to make a bicycle, and they couldn't really make a bicycle. So I suggested that they make a scale model of a bicycle, and that worked out pretty well. So if you have any concerns about this, contact me. So those are the two things. You're going to be creating your own Kente cloth type patterns and design, and you're going to be brainstorming for a project. You're not building the project now, you're brainstorming for it and proposing what it is. And then as we go to the last portion of this module, written reflection about Africa, this needs to be a reflection on the entire module. So we're talking about not just Kente cloth, but we're talking about Kente cloth, we're talking about terracotta, we're talking about pottery, and we're talking about visual markers for some of the art that we look at when we do our research for Sundiata. So we're talking about all of that kind of stuff. Were you aware that in Kenya, about 1,200 years ago, people already had hot and cold running water with piping? Something to think about. And that in the Kingdom of Nubia, which is south and east of present-day Egypt, they built pyramids. They're taller and more narrow, proportionate to the Egyptian pyramids, but the Nubian engineers look like they were brought to Africa and they were already in Africa. They were brought to Egypt to teach Egyptian engineers how to construct buildings there. So the Nubian pyramids predate the Egyptian pyramids. So some interesting things. So as you do this, consider all the different kinds of things that you can do. And ideally, well, no, not ideal. I want everybody to take your time to think about it. So set aside two periods to do the Kente cloth design. One, to do your research and to fiddle with the designs a bit, and then let it sit for a day and then come back to it. And I guarantee that you will have better designs that you do. The other is I would set up maybe a couple different times to brainstorm. Maybe you want to brainstorm with one of your roommates about your Sundiata project, and that will only last a half an hour, and then you keep notes and make some sketches, and then the next day you brainstorm with a family member. Do the same kind of thing. That will generate different ideas. When we talked about cognition early on in the term, one of the things we talked about was brainstorming. If you do your brainstorming, first couple ideas may really suck. That's the reality. But as you get more active and the blood flow in your brain increases as you're talking about these kinds of things with somebody, you will find that the longer you talk about it, the longer you think about it, during the brainstorming session, you will start coming up with ideas that are better. They'll get better. And then after a while, you'll have an idea. You think, oh yeah, I think that's the one. So work on those things, and remember the two written reflections. One is just about Kente cloth. The other one is about the continent of Africa. Remember, there are 54 countries in the continent of Africa, at least 4,000 languages and modes of communication that were developed there, a deeper and more diverse genetic diversity than exists in all the rest of the world, and profoundly ancient artifacts of human occupation. That's where our ancestors come from, many, many, many thousands of years ago. So think about all that. And again, I apologize that we're only visiting Africa for 1 week, because there are so many different countries with so many beautiful different ways of producing art, different construction techniques, different materials. Absolutely fascinating stuff. And it's worth just looking on your own as well. All right, folks, that's all I have for today. I really hope that you guys have a wonderful week. And please give me a call, email me, contact me. I shouldn't have said give me a call. The best thing to do is to contact me via email or text, and that information is in the syllabus, and I will get back to you just as soon as I possibly can. And like I said, I am working on getting the grading caught up so everybody will know right where they stand at the midterm. All right, thank you so much for spending this hour with me, and I sure hope you guys have an absolutely wonderful week and weekend until we see each other again next week.